listening to the Construction Big Breakfast, where we give you a hearty serving of insider tips and business strategies to help fuel your day so you can thrive in the construction industry. Now, here's your host from Invennt.
Welcome to another edition of the Construction Big Breakfast. Still in lockdown, as you can see, but maybe, depending on how things go by the time this is released, we might be free to see each other in the flesh, but who knows? Who knows? Today, our special guest is Ben from Assael. Ben, can you introduce yourself briefly?
Hi guys, yeah, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. So my name's Ben Channon. I'm an architect at Assael Architecture, but my job title actually just changed before lockdown to head of Wellbeing, which is quite timely. I think it's probably a subject that a lot of us are talking and thinking about at the moment. But yeah, so traditionally a background in architecture, but now really thinking, talking, writing and designing all things well-being.
Excellent. And as always, when we have something architectural to talk about, we bring Sara in, our resident architect, just to make sure that, as QSs and engineers don't just go and bash the architect. We have to have a fair and balanced approach to the conversation. So, as always, our regular listeners will know that the first thing that we always ask our guest is, what did you have for breakfast?
So I'm on the bagel hype at the moment. So I've been, since we went to lockdown, I've been eating lots of bagels. I find they're like quite comforting. Like comfort food right now is quite important, but trying to balance it out with a bit of cycling, running, exercise as much as possible. Although some days tougher than others. So I had kind of New York style bagel today, some cream cheese, some like nice ham in there as well. So yeah, good, nice start to the day. Hearty breakfast.
Very much so. And Sara, how about you?
No, I had a bowl of porridge with berries and bananas. So the usual thing. Not very interesting. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, no, the same. And I keep saying I'm going to do something different next time, so I'm a bit more interesting, but no, porridge again.
Sounds like you guys are healthier than me.
Well, I mean, lockdown has helped me focus a little bit on sort of being a bit healthier. A bit more time, when you're not commuting. I've become a Joe Wicks fan. In lockdown, try and get sort of at least half hour in with him in the morning, a sort of slightly healthier breakfast, get sort of energized and awake, and started doing a little bit of cycling. But from what I see from when you're not moaning about the Royal Parks,
don't get me started about Richmond Park. Everywhere else in London is like opening up new cycle routes, trying to promote cycling and encourage healthy travel and commuting. And they closed Richmond Park to cyclists. It's crazy.
It is. Yeah, you would think they'd be encouraging sort of more of it rather than less of it.
It doesn't make sense to me, but I don't know. I'm sure there's a logic there.
Yeah, I'm sure. So for a bit of sort of further context for sort of the podcast and sort of why we sort of reached out to Assael. So we've known Assael a couple of years now, and you guys have been doing some really interesting stuff, and really pushing the envelope on sort of changing how users interact with the buildings they live in, really changing sort of the impact that has on people's lives and stuff like that. And it's fascinating, and with everything that's going on around us, it's really shown some weaknesses, I think, hasn't it, in sort of the environment that we live in what is granted an extreme circumstance. But it has sort of raised questions in, have we built with sort of the people who live there in mind?
I think that's definitely true to an extent. Yeah, we did a survey, which I think you guys have seen quite early on in lockdown, actually within the first month of lockdown, because we kind of saw it as a bit of an opportunity. In a way, we're all kind of guinea pigs at the moment, and we're all stuck in our own homes. Probably 95% of our lives right now. So we wanted to try and find out how people's homes were working for them, and how what was keeping people's spirits up, what people were finding really challenging about their homes. And it was interesting what we got back. Actually, we kind of found that people really valuing things like daylight, which you don't necessarily think are, they're not always top of the priority list when we're talking about you know, when we think about homes, although light was the first chapter in my book, Happy by Design, so something that I've been shouting about for a long time, trying to get more light into people's homes, and not just because it makes us feel better, but also apparently, you know, homes with more daylight have been shown to have lower levels of bacteria in and stuff. So all very relevant when we're talking about sort of illnesses, pandemics, things like that. But also things like outdoor space are really, really important. And obviously more and more of us are now living in cities. I think we're getting close to, I think maybe over 50% of people now living in cities. So it's becoming more and more of an issue. We've got to start thinking about the typology of the home, the apartment, and how can we design homes that work for us in all scenarios, because obviously what we've found is this is a very, very different scenario to what we're used to, as you said, and our homes generally do work pretty well for us when we're spending our mornings and evenings and weekends in them, but actually when we're forced to spend all day every day in them, and we have to use them also as they become our offices, they become our gyms, are they really, do they work for that use? Are they flexible enough, and are they adaptable enough? I don't know.
Yeah, you go from thinking you've got loads of space to all of a sudden going, oh, there's no room anymore. Where, you know, where's my private sort of space? And
yeah, absolutely. And I think things like storage as well, again, kind of one of the least glamorous parts of architecture and design. You never get on the front cover of an architecture magazine because you've designed great storage in your apartments. But it's you know, this lockdown has really shown us the ability to actually have enough space for all our stuff, particularly as we've all rushed to the shops, I'm sure, and bought like home workout equipment and all that kind of stuff. I've taken up painting again, which has really like helped me to feel like I've got a sense of achievement during what's been obviously quite a frustrating few months. But you know, with that comes loads of extra stuff. You've got like canvases and brushes and paints and all kinds of stuff. So my fiance is tearing her hair out because there's just stuff everywhere. And so, yeah, the importance of storage is huge, and it's, as I said, something that's probably a bit underappreciated pre-lockdown.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I live sort of in the suburbs out Essex way, and so I've lived in this house now since about 2012, and I remember going to a few sort of new build estates and just walking around, and you know, by then I had sort of 2 kids, so I knew the importance of storage. And going around going, all right, where does everything go? Where does the stuff go? It was sort of a real sort of shift to sort of minimalism almost in sort of in house design, especially just like, I can't put anything anywhere. I can barely put a bed in here, never mind a bed and a wardrobe.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder, like, to what extent kind of the popularity of modernism and that kind of minimalist approach, that almost that Marie Kondo approach of like, get rid of everything you can possibly get rid of. I wonder what impact that's had on architecture and design, whether that's played a role in the kind of homes we see now, because you go and see most new build homes and they are, you know, pretty much everything is like plain white, plasterboard everywhere. And it's great because it makes these nice bright spaces which feel big. But we don't get a lot of natural materials in our homes anymore. You're right, things like storage are often overlooked, and in space standards now, you know, for a 2-person apartment, you get a metre and a half squared of storage in a home, which is next to nothing, you know. So actually, for me, and I think at Assael, we've really been focusing on is that idea of livability, trying to create and design homes that are really livable, that make people feel great every single day when they use them, and that ultimately are going to benefit people's health, both physical and mental health.
Well, personally, because I live in an apartment in London, so now more than ever we experience the importance of design and of the storages, and you know, having a balcony or even a garden, you know, on the relation with the outdoor world. Since now we are locked, it's been like 3 months now, so this had a tremendous effect on our well-being. I mean, thank God I have big windows, but you know, a garden would be very beneficial.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I live in an apartment building as well, and I don't have a private outdoor space. We've got a shared roof garden, which now people are a bit more relaxed about using for people who, for a time reference, what are we at now? We're mid-June, so the lockdown measures are gradually easing, and people are a bit more comfortable. Shops are open now, for example, so people are a bit more comfortable being in each other's company. But certainly for the first month or 2 of lockdown, no one was really using that outdoor roof garden because it's not enormous and people didn't want to be sat too close to each other. So that's certainly something I think that has emerged out of this, is that importance of both private outdoor space, or communal outdoor space that has kind of subdivided areas and, you know, areas that people can occupy at different times.
I mean, on the note of safety, I mean, how do you think architects will be able to integrate measures in the design, not only considered to safety because of, you know, of the COVID situation, but as well sensitive to well-being? I mean, do you think there's a balance that could be achieved?
Yeah, I think it's something we have to be a little bit cautious about, because the instinctive kind of, I suppose, the non-designed approach is, right, let's just put perspex screens up everywhere, which, great, it solves the problem to an extent, but we've got to think more about, it's about more than just keeping people safe. Keeping people safe is like the bare minimum. We have to go above and beyond that. We have to keep people safe, but also keep them happy. And at the end of the day, people are going to start returning to their offices soon if they haven't already. And the last thing we were going to want to do is walk into an office that A, looks completely different to the place we left, like, so it's almost unrecognizable. B, kind of big screens up everywhere, so you feel like actually you're almost maybe in those kind of 1970s style cubicles. I don't know if you've ever seen the film The Matrix, where they're all in these like identical little boxes
full of plexiglass partitions.
No one wants to feel like a battery chicken at work. And also, you know, coming in, I can imagine places just, yes, we have to clean, but places stinking of bleach and feeling very sterile, almost like a laboratory.
Hospital.
Yeah, you can picture that experience walking back into that office, and that's not going to be a nice experience for a lot of people who are already probably feeling quite anxious about returning to work, quite nervous, or potentially even scared. So I think we need to think bigger picture, and yes, we have to keep people safe, but we need to consider ways in which we can do it that actually make people feel good and feel comfortable too.
Yeah, and I mean the offices. You've got sort of two types of offices as well. I mean, Assael have got a wonderful building, and it's your building. You're the only tenant. Whereas, you know, we share with others. Yeah. You've got the communal
services. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you know, I also go over to Canada, not for a while, obviously, but I used to go every sort of 6 weeks or so. When we were in a WeWork there, I mean, how comfortable will you feel where everything is open to anyone and everyone, and how will that work, and what sort of what will the shifts and the changes there be? It'll be interesting.
Will be, yeah. I think we'll see
starting to shift, wasn't it, into being sort of more comfortable in each other's space.
Yeah, absolutely. Although not, interestingly, from a lot of the research, not everyone was seeming to love that. Like, obviously things like hot desking and open plan offices were, you know, very much the norm pre-lockdown, but actually when you start asking people how they feel about hot desking, the results were always quite mixed, and not everyone did love it. So it will be interesting to see what kind of office typology emerges as the dominant one post lockdown, and whether you know, this is just short term and we get a vaccine and we return to the open plan hot desking very quickly, or whether people start to think about other approaches. I certainly think when you're looking at shared office spaces, or certainly shared common spaces, we're going to see a rise of like trying to eliminate touch from a lot of stuff. So probably, you know, ironically, touch screens were just becoming kind of, they were ubiquitous when they touch screens were everywhere, and now you think about how many fingers have touched that screen. It's kind of quite gross when you think about it now. You know, we're always being told how dirty our mobile phones are. Well, imagine an iPad that's had 1,000 people a day touching it. So I think we'll probably see a lot of that, actually maybe a bit of a step back from that. Yeah. Might be interesting to see whether we go a bit more old school with kind of traditional sign-in books where everyone uses their own pen to just sign in on paper, which seems so outdated now, but maybe it was a good system. It'll be
there's definitely, there'll be less sort of, you know, Monday to Friday 9 to 5. I think
absolutely
it's definitely allow people to embrace sort of digital tools a little bit better and understand, and hopefully, you know, that can help move to a better work-life balance and ultimately support sort of better well-being for everyone. So I mean, just sort of going back to a little bit more about you, Ben. I mean, I think from memory you went to uni in God's country, didn't you, when you were Cardiff uni boy?
Cardiff, I did, yes. Yeah, I went to uni in Cardiff when Wales had pretty much the best team in world rugby, and they won, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 Grand Slams during my time there, but it was dark years for me anyway as an Englishman.
Great place to be. Great place to be. I might have passed you on Queen Street a couple of times.
Probably. I don't know if I remember.
How did your journey into sort of embracing and seeing the importance of well-being in what you sort of design? How did that happen for you?
So, I mean, I'd always been interested in the idea of like kind of human-centric design, and it was something that Cardiff, the Welsh School of Architecture, is like prides itself on, really. I remember one project we actually started, the whole idea was you start from the inside out, so you could start with a really small feature from someone's home, so it might be like a sink or even just like a door handle or something, that an object that someone uses every day, and you start with the design of that and then you work outwards. And obviously the approach in architecture is often quite different to that. You start with footprints and work inwards, but trying to encourage that sense of designing for the person. But then when I was actually in my mid-20s, I kind of had some issues of my own with my mental health. So basically just burnt myself out. I was pushing myself way too hard. I should say not on my employer's request, but being a perfectionist myself, I just felt that I had to put in the time. Everything I did had to be completely perfect, and to the nth iteration, just resolved. And eventually that just, you can't do that. It's not sustainable to do that for years on end. And I basically just got to the point where I think my brain was just a bit overloaded, and so ended up having some problems with anxiety for a couple of years, which thankfully I got help with, and came out the other side and all better now. But it was a difficult couple of years. But what it really did was gave me this kind of interest in that subject of particularly mental health, is where I kind of started. It was my jumping off point for this subject, and I was interested in how, obviously I was designing buildings every single day, and I wanted to make sure that actually they were being beneficial to people's mental health, and the moves we were making, the designs we were producing, were actually going to have a positive impact on how people felt when they used those spaces. And it kind of sounds obvious, it sounds like we should all be doing that as architects, but I realized that we hadn't really been taught about necessarily the psychological impacts of stuff at university. So hence that's why I wrote my book. I just realized there's a lot of easy moves we can all do as architects to try and to improve this stuff, and just wanted to get the word out there really and share it with other architects, with developers, and make sure we all had a better understanding of the subject.
And how
exactly.
Sorry, you go, Sara.
I just wanted to add on this. I mean, as you just mentioned, I think personally as well, the relation between architecture and mental health and well-being should be strengthened during the education of the architect, because I studied architecture as well. I mean, you can tell that relationship between architecture and engineering already exists from a long time ago, but we study, for example, to make design more in relation to the environment, more sustainable. However, its impact on our well-being is sometimes overlooked, where the collaboration, I think, between the medical world and the School of Architecture is less obvious. So what do you think, after doing all this research about architecture and its relation with the well-being?
What do I think? Well, it's vital, really. I mean,
in terms of integrating this into the curriculum of architecture, if you wanna say it.
I think we're already seeing it start to happen, kind of actually by demand, like from the demand from students. So I've been asked to go and speak in numerous universities now on the subject, which is really good. Where have I been? Cardiff, Liverpool, Edinburgh, Cambridge. So quite a few universities are becoming interested in the subject. It's largely because students are actually stepping up and saying that we want to know more about this, because you can imagine, like, students nowadays as well, like that kind of Generation Z that's coming through, they're very interested in things like mental health. They're having conversations about mental health in a way that our generation never did, because it just wasn't really talked about 10 years ago. So they are now all designing, a lot of them are designing projects about mental health, or thinking, I want to design a place that supports great mental health, and they want to know how to do that. So I think it is naturally going to be integrated into the curriculum more and more, but also we're learning a lot more about how buildings affect our physical health. We're getting things like the Well Building Standard coming through now, which I'm involved with, and just trying to make sure that really everything we build is, using healthy materials that aren't going to create really like poisonous air quality indoors and things like that, which sounds obvious, but you wouldn't believe like how many chemicals, like our furniture, flooring, carpets, window sealants, they all kick out these chemicals into the air, and we just never learn about them. So things are changing, and I think people need to be aware of this stuff, because in a few years' time, it's all going to be mandatory.
So do you think it's sort of going to be a sort of more of a groundswell of change? So it's the new architects coming into the industry that'll just do it, rather than clients starting to become more informed? Because I hate it as an industry. We're too reliant on waiting for the client to say what, you know, they'll adopt it. They'll want to do something different. Otherwise, I won't bother. And it doesn't always happen because of that wait.
No, it's a bit of both. What we are seeing is the general public is becoming a lot more interested in how buildings support their health. Just as you say, because they're becoming better educated, they're getting a better understanding of this stuff. It's being written about in national newspapers. So people are starting to care a lot more about the impact of their home on their well-being, or just any building on their well-being. But we're also seeing it actually coming a lot from, as you say, from the people at the top, whether it's the funders or the clients. They're starting to incorporate things like health and well-being into their ESG strategies and into their KPIs. So actually, you know, funders now, for example, are starting to say with build-to-rent developments that actually we are, one of our kind of conditions is that this development must have a focus on human health. It must potentially, maybe it might have to meet well standard, or it might have to meet these certain criteria. Because nobody, at the end of the day, nobody wants to be seen as producing a development which is kind of going to have a negative impact on health. And so I think that it's kind of coming from top down and bottom up, and they are meeting in the middle now. And we're seeing more and more clients becoming interested in the topic of health and well-being, which is partly why my new role came about, really, because I was spending as much time speaking to clients about well-being as I was actually about, you know, traditional architecture. And I do think there's a real possibility that as we learn more and more over the next few years, and people are going to start expecting better and better quality and standard of homes, we may potentially reach a stage where if you're not designing homes with a strong well-being focus, then actually there just won't be the demand for them, much in a way now that there's a kind of minimum expectation in terms of sustainability and insulation and carbon and all of these kind of eco issues. I think we can see the same sort of stuff happening with health and well-being.
And I think technology as well has a big role in filling the gap, because now we can see that, for example, neuroarchitecture is discussed more than ever now, with the presence of the IoT, maybe where we are able to track the occupants and collect data and then use it, you know, to improve the maybe working environments, their house, their pollution level.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think actually we as an industry have probably fallen short slightly when it comes to post-occupancy evaluation and actually learning how our buildings are working for the people who are using them. That's something that we're trying to push more now at Assael, and try to do more post-occupancy evaluation, so we can really understand, you know, okay, we place the cycle store here, we place the bin store here. How does that work for people in everyday lives? Because these are the spaces that they get used every single day by people. Again, they're not necessarily the glamorous spaces, but they affect people's lives every single day. And, you know, things like, okay, we used full height windows in some apartments. We used 800mm windows in other apartments. How has that affected the user experience? Which do they prefer and which has worked best? So really trying to get a broad set of data that explains actually how all of our decisions are impacting residents.
What we can do more of and be better at as well is we wait for, you know, the formal answer. You know, here's the survey, and if you don't fill out that survey, we never know. Whereas, you know, so many people will just tell you on social media anyway, whether they're enjoying their experience. And you know, it's not particularly snooping, but sort of is, I guess. You know, there's that fine line between Big Brother and actually sort of using what they're saying in public domain for ultimately the greater good, because you're looking to further improve their experience and future experience of the next development.
Yeah, absolutely. And every single industry does it. You know, they'll put out a product and they'll see how people are getting on with it. They'll see what they need to improve in the next version, and they will make those improvements and see what worked and what didn't work. And as I said, in the property industry, perhaps historically, it hasn't been as good at doing that as other industries. So I think it's definitely an area that can be improved, and it can make a big difference.
It's the one of the challenges our industry has is with the existing stock and the older stock. I mean, it's sort of a challenge from a sustainability point of view. We've tried to ignore for a long time, even though it creates more carbon than most things sort of in the country. We're always doing very good in improving the new stuff, but actually creating a nice, easy solution for how do I turn sort of that 70s house into something highly sustainable. Be similar from a well-being perspective. What do we have to change to the existing stock, or is the materials that we were using then, like you say, just so full of stuff that will never really allow you, the windows being in the wrong place and the wrong size, and can you get the more light without overheating and all those things? Is it that the existing stock is just lost to us?
I'd say the opposite. If we take, for example, a Victorian house, it's quite a good example. Actually, the people designing those buildings really knew what they were doing when it came to human health and well-being in a lot of ways. Obviously, there were some issues in Victorian times. We had a very busy London, very industrial London that was very polluted and, very, very densely populated homes a lot of the time. But let's just take out of context a Victorian house and look at it. We've got things like high ceilings. So we're going to get lots of daylight and that feeling of like psychological sense of freedom that comes with a high ceiling. You've got your own front door, so a sense of kind of ownership, belonging. You've got generally dual aspect, if not triple aspect, because you've often got an L shape at the back. So you're getting light in, you can get cross ventilation, so you're kind of flushing the air through very quickly, getting good air quality and lots of ventilation. Often brick built, so you've got nice tactility at ground floor where you can interact, touch the building facade and actually get that sense of tactility that we talk about, which kind of makes you a little bit more mindful of your surroundings, engage with your surroundings more than, say, just typical like plasterboard finishes that we see. And so loads and loads of things that are working really well within a Victorian home that do support our health and well-being. Obviously, if we are then renovating, we need to be aware of lots of those things I was talking about. So are you going to put in new carpets that emit loads of VOCs, which actually have a really negative impact on the indoor air quality and things like that? Are the windows necessarily big enough? That's one thing. Obviously, window sizes on older houses tend to be a bit smaller, so that might be something that we look to renovate. But then you've got that issue of sustainability and heat loss and or overheating if you've got too big southern-facing windows. So all these things are interconnected and everything hangs quite finely in balance. But no, I'd say generally traditional housing is actually pretty good, and there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from it. And most of them have their own back gardens as well. Which is
true. So we're sort of getting to the half-hour mark. So I guess, Ben, if there's sort of one thing from you from a well-being perspective you'd like other architects, clients, builders out there to really sort of think about and try and drive forward as we sort of exit lockdown and sort of get back to some sort of normality, what would your key takeaway be?
I think it would just be that designing for health and well-being is more important now than it has ever been, and the last 3 months have shown us that. But really that it's got to be a holistic thing. You've got to integrate these concepts into your designs from an early stage. So a bit like sustainability, you can't just chuck a wind turbine or a solar panel on the top of a building and say, I've created a sustainable building. You've got to really start embedding those concepts from an early stage. And it's the same with health and well-being. It's about how you orient your building on the site, where you place your height, where you place your windows. Every single decision you make is going to have some impact on the way the residents experience that. So it's going to affect their mental health and also a lot of the physical aspects of the building, which are going to impact their physical health.
Right, fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time. I'll let you know if we get more views than Tim. You can start having a little sort of internal competition.
We're going to beat Tim, no problem. No problem.
Well, no, it's been a really interesting conversation. So thank you, and thank you, Sara, for joining me as well and questioning Ben. We'll put some links to your book in the bio so that anyone who wants to read more can go find that. And as always, if you've enjoyed listening to us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and make sure that you tune in to our next episode. So thank you very much, and see you all soon.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Cheers.
Come to Invennt for the highest R&D tax credit you can claim. We help construction businesses get back millions in tax credits every year. Contact us today for a free review. Thanks for joining us this week on the Construction Big Breakfast. Make sure to visit our website, www.inventt.com, where you can subscribe to the Construction Big Breakfast on all platforms so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a positive rating. Or if you'd simply share it with a friend, that would help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.